Hi, I'm Max Talberg, founder and chairperson of Global Visions, and in this video I'm introducing a theory of reality I've developed called Coherent Emergentism and its perspective on the origin of reality. Why is there something rather than nothing? This is philosophy's oldest and perhaps most difficult question. Leibniz formulated it most famously, but the ancient Greeks were already wrestling with it. Most theories either sidestep the question entirely or answer it in a way that merely shifts the problem one step back. Today, we will go through what Coherent Emergentism says in response to this question. Let's start with what we know for certain. We know from experience that something exists. This is an indisputable starting point. You cannot doubt existence without first experiencing it. From this follows an important conclusion. Absolute nothing, complete non-existence, cannot be the final or only state of reality, because if it were, we would not be here contemplating the matter. This is not a trivial observation. Parmenides and Aristotle already recognized in ancient philosophy that being and non-being are logically incompatible. Nothing cannot give rise to anything, for if it could, it would not truly be nothing. So, if something exists, existence must carry some kind of necessity, or it is, at minimum, the natural outcome that follows from the very nature of reality. But how, then, did existence begin? My theory's answer is that before material reality, there was potentiality. At this point, many people might react, isn't this just the same problem all over again? If potentiality exists, who or what caused it? This criticism is fair, but it rests on a misunderstanding of what I mean by potentiality. Potentiality is not a thing among things. It is not matter, energy, or a condition that would require an external cause. It is something more fundamental, the logical precondition for anything to exist at all. Think of it this way. If you try to imagine a complete nothing, an absolute void in which there is absolutely nothing, you will find that something still remains. A possibility remains, a potential remains. You cannot get rid of it, because potentiality is not a thing that can be removed. It is what is left over when everything else has been taken away. And because we know that something exists, we are necessarily required to assume this potentiality. For this reason, potentiality does not require a causal explanation. It is not a temporal state. It is neither before nor after anything. It is a logical necessity. There is another important observation connected to this. The question, what was there before potentiality, is misleading. Why? Because time itself is not foundational. According to my theory, time only comes into being once there are coherent structures that change. Before and after are concepts internal to coherent reality. Martin Heidegger noted that nothing destabilizes the ordinary categories of logic. Time and causality belong among these. My theory develops this idea further. Potentiality is logically necessary, but not temporally prior. It does not precede reality in time, it is its precondition. When coherent structures begin to form and persist, time begins. Then there is before and after. Before that, there was not. But why does reality look the way it does? Why are the laws the way they are? My theory introduces a concept called the metaphysical coherence selection. Perhaps many potential configurations attempted to actualize. Perhaps there were countless possible orders, structures, and laws, but only those that were sufficiently coherent survived without collapsing. This is analogous to a process we recognize from physical systems. Certain structures stabilize, others disintegrate, not because someone chose them, but because only coherent structures can persist. This also explains the so-called fine-tuning problem, why the constants of physics appear to be precisely suited to making life possible, without requiring a designer or a cosmic purpose. No designer is needed. Only a filter is needed, coherence. There is one more illuminating observation here. The realization of existence does not require universal coherence. It is not necessary that everything be coherent. It is sufficient that some chain of events achieves and maintains coherence. Incoherent structures do not continue, they collapse. This is not a probability calculation, it is selection, and only one enduring chain is needed for something to exist and develop. This is far more probable than the scenario in which a coherent structure would never arise, even if incoherent activity were quantitatively more abundant. The abundance of incoherence does not prevent the persistence of coherence. It simply perishes through its own contradictions. At this point, it is worth pausing to confront a challenge that directly tests the theory. Someone might say, wait a moment, isn't this just a tautology? You say that only coherent structures persist, but doesn't that simply mean that what exists because it is capable of existing? You are not explaining anything. You are merely defining the same thing with two different words. This is a legitimate objection, and it deserves an honest answer. I will grant it, my theory contains circularity. Coherence enables persistence, and persistence is a sign of coherence. The circle closes, but my theory does not treat this as a logical error. It treats it as a structural necessity. Why? Let us return to the theory's basic starting point. The goal is to make as few assumptions as possible. If we take this goal seriously, the explanatory principle must be internal and self-referential. It must be anchored in reality itself, not in something outside it. Because what happens if we choose an external explanation? Whether it is a creator, some set of meta-level laws, or simply that's just how it is? All of these options immediately generate a new question. Where did this come from, and how does it interact with reality? An external explanation does not escape circularity. It merely relocates it. Instead, the claim that coherence enables persistence is a self-grounding axiom, the simplest possible starting point, which requires no further explanation. Think of it like the basic law of logic. The law of non-contradiction states that something cannot simultaneously be and not be. We do not ask why this law holds. It is the starting point to which all thought is anchored. Coherence is the corresponding ontological anchor. It is the point at which explanation inevitably returns to itself. Because the explanatory principle must be grounded in what exists. It is also worth looking the alternative squarely in the eye. Imagine a reality in which incoherent structures could persist. What would this mean? It would mean that contradictory entities would continue to exist, that causes would not lead to effects in any consistent way, and that causal reasoning would collapse entirely. In such a reality, there would be no science, no logic, and no explanation of anything. That is not an alternative. It is the dissolution of all concepts. So, yes, my theory is, in this sense, circular, but it is the only possible circle if we want an explanation that does not require an endless chain of further explanations. In summary, coherent emergentism does not claim that existence is logically necessary in the same way that a mathematical truth is necessary. It acknowledges that existence may be contingent. But because we know that something exists, and because non-existence proves to be incoherent as a global state, existence is, at minimum, the natural outcome that follows from the very nature of reality. And coherence is the minimal structure sufficient to explain continuity and development, without additional assumptions. It may not be ontologically necessary, but it is epistemically necessary, the best and simplest explanation for why there is something rather than nothing. In the following videos, we will go deeper into how coherent structures develop and what emergence actually means. If this raised questions for you, or if you want to challenge any of the ideas, especially regarding the tautology objection, write it in the comments. These videos are at their best when they spark genuine discussion. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.